September 26, 1983. Deep beneath Moscow, inside a secret bunker, a Soviet officer stares at his screen. The alarm is screaming. Red lights flash across the command center. The computer system is certain. 5 American nuclear missiles are heading toward the Soviet Union. He has minutes to decide, report the attack and trigger World War III, or trust his gut and risk the destruction of his entire country. One man, one decision, the fate of the world. To understand what happened that night, you have to understand the world in 1983. The Cold War wasn't just cold anymore, it was frozen solid with fear. Ronald Reagan had called the Soviet Union an evil empire just months earlier. The Soviets shot down a Korean passenger jet in September, killing 269 people. Tensions between the superpowers were at their worst since the Cuban Missile Crisis. Both sides had thousands of nuclear weapons pointed at each other, enough to end civilization several times over, and both sides were terrified the other would strike first. The Soviet early warning system, codenamed OKO, was designed to detect American missile launches from space. Satellites watched the United States constantly, scanning for the heat signature of rockets lifting off. If the system detected an attack, Soviet leadership would have less than 20 minutes to decide whether to launch their own missiles in response. 20 minutes to decide the fate of humanity. On the night of September 26th, Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov was the duty officer at Serpukhov 15, a secret command center south of Moscow. He wasn't supposed to be there. He was covering someone else's shift. And then, just past midnight, everything changed. The siren cuts through the silence like a knife. Petrov looks up from his desk. On the main screen, a single word appears in bright red letters: launch. The computer reports one missile has been detected lifting off from an American base. The room erupts into controlled chaos. Officers rush to their stations. Voices overlap, sharp and urgent. Petrov's heart is pounding, but his training kicks in. He watches the screen, waiting for confirmation. Then it happens. A second missile appears, then a third, a fourth, a fifth. The system is now reporting 5 intercontinental ballistic missiles inbound. Launch sites confirmed, trajectory confirmed. Impact time, less than 20 minutes. The protocol is clear. Petrov must immediately report the attack to Soviet High Command. From there, the information would reach the Soviet Premier and the military leadership, and they would almost certainly launch a counterattack. But something doesn't feel right. Petrov stares at the screen. His mind is racing. Why only 5 missiles? If the Americans were launching a first strike, they would send hundreds, maybe thousands. They would try to destroy the Soviet Union's ability to retaliate. 5 missiles made no sense. It wasn't how you start a nuclear war. But the computer was certain. Satellite data didn't lie. Or did it? Petrov thinks about the system. OKO had only been operational for a short time. There had been glitches before, false alarms. The technology was new, and new technology made mistakes. But what if this wasn't a mistake? The officers around him are waiting, staring at him. The phone to high command is in his hand. Every second he waits is a second the missiles get closer. Every second he waits is a second the Soviet Union can't respond. He looks at the screen again. 5 missiles. The computer is screaming at him. The radar systems should be picking them up by now, confirming what the satellites saw. But the ground radar shows nothing. Nothing. Petrov makes his decision. He reports it as a system malfunction. The room goes silent. His subordinates look at him in disbelief. The alarm is still blaring. The screen still shows 5 missiles heading towards Soviet territory. And Petrov is saying it's a false alarm. If he's wrong, Soviet leadership won't know they're under attack until the missiles detonate. Millions will die without warning. The country will have no time to respond. His career is over. At best. At worst. If he's wrong, he'll be remembered as the man who allowed the Soviet Union to be destroyed. The minutes crawl by like hours. Petrov sits at his station, watching the screen, waiting for the ground radar to confirm the attack. It doesn't. No missiles appear, no explosions, no impacts. The system finally updates. Error. False alarm. Petrov was right, but he doesn't feel relief. Not yet. He feels numb. Later, investigators would determine what happened. Sunlight had reflected off high-altitude clouds over the United States. The satellites mistook the reflection for the heat signature of missile launches. A trick of light. That's all it was. A trick of light that almost ended the world. But here's what makes this even more terrifying. Nobody knew about it. For years, this incident remained classified, hidden, buried in Soviet archives. Stanislav Petrov went back to his life. He didn't receive a medal. He didn't get a promotion. In fact, he was quietly transferred to a less sensitive position. The Soviet military was embarrassed by the system failure, and Petrov had filed incomplete paperwork during the incident. He had been too focused on preventing nuclear war to document everything properly, so they reprimanded him instead of honoring him. He retired a few years later, lived in a small apartment on a military pension, struggled financially. The man who saved the world lived in obscurity. The truth didn't come out until 1998. 15 years after that September night, the story was finally declassified. A Russian newspaper published an article about what really happened at Serpukhov 15. The world learned how close it had come. Stanislav Petrov was finally recognized. He received awards from international organizations. The United Nations honored him. So did various peace groups around the world. In interviews, Petrov was humble, almost dismissive of his own actions. He said he was just doing his job, that he was in the right place at the right time, that he got lucky. But those who studied the incident disagreed. Other officers might have followed protocol. They might have trusted the computer over their instincts. They might have made the call that ended everything. Petrov died in 2017 at the age of 77. His death went unnoticed for months. When the news finally broke, the world mourned quietly. Memorials were held. Articles were written. But most people still don't know his name. Most people don't know that on September 26, 1983, one man's decision stood between civilization and annihilation. Here's what haunts historians about that night. It wasn't the last false alarm of the Cold War. There were others. Near misses that we only learned about years later. In 1995, Russia almost launched nuclear weapons when they mistook a Norwegian research rocket for an American missile. How many other times did we come this close? How many other Petrovs were there, making quiet decisions in dark rooms, saving us without us ever knowing? The Cold War ended. The Soviet Union collapsed. The threat of nuclear annihilation seemed to fade, but the weapons are still there. Thousands of them. Still pointed at each other. Still waiting. And somewhere, right now, someone is sitting in a bunker, watching a screen, waiting for an alarm that might be real, or might be sunlight, reflecting off clouds. Stanislav Petrov proved something that night. That humanity's survival sometimes comes down to one person, one moment, one choice, and that the most important decisions in history are often made by people whose names we'll never know, until it's almost too late.